Excellent. So my name is Jared Mauch. So we have the case where there's a lot of routing leaks that exist on the networks right now. And so I came up with this way to analyze the AS path and sort of figure out if it was basically highly likely to be something that was leaked or not. So what I do is I take a RIB snapshot from 2914. I also go and I process all the BGP updates that are stored in MRT format over at route views. Because there's a lot of data there which reveals a lot of stuff which we obviously don't see from our network's perspective. So what I do is I've got a set of networks that I've declared as quote-unquote major networks. You can argue whether or not they should be listed here, but this is sort of it's an evolving list and it can continue to be added onto. And so what I do is I take the AS path, I undo the prepends that are any prepends that are in there, and then I count the number of basically of those ASNs that are in that prior set in the AS path. So you can look at that and you can figure out and you come up with a score. So the default score is that I use in the code is 2. Anything over 2 is obviously something weird if you've got more than 2 of these major network ASNs in the path. I go and I document some of the known business relationships because obviously some of those networks in that list do happen to buy transit. So I go and I bump up the threshold by 1 for every time I see their ASN and then their upstream ASN in the path, and that goes up over time. So I've been processing the data sometime since July, just sort of passively, and I started sticking it in a database so I could do queries. So far, I've got 360,000 leak events that I've found. Some of those are multiple views of the same event because multiple different people are feeding the same view into route views, so the AS paths are slightly different. Some of the things we've noticed is weekends tend to have a lot less noise. People aren't tinkering with their networks as much on the weekends, so there's generally less leaks on the weekends. I've also spent time emailing the networks that I see involved in the leaks, and about 50% of them, or probably a little bit more, actually respond to it and are willing to apply either an example policy that I give them on their routers to go and fix the leak such that things aren't happening. So there are some language barriers because I'm primarily an English speaker, and some of these networks don't necessarily, operate English as their first language. So I've got this graph of leaks over time. I didn't get the date stuff on the right. It sort of starts in the beginning of sometime in August, and it ended last night. And this sort of shows the leaks over time. So there tends to be a relatively stable amount of noise, and then a couple different events that periodically happen. So some of the major events that I've noticed, I sent an email out to the Nanog list back in August when Savvis leaked a large number of their peer routes from one peer to another. The feed from route views, AT&T, I believe they feed out of one of their labs or something, which is probably why they leaked some of these the AS paths with the private ASNs into the route views too, as well as AboveNet. MFN has leaked a large number of peer routes in the past. So the reason for a lot of these leaks isn't that people aren't filtering. In most cases, they're actually filtering their customers with the prefix list. But what happens is, it's some small regional network in a lot of these cases that has a downstream customer, but they've got 2 or 3 upstreams, and so they go and they end up their downstream customer disconnects from them, and either temporarily because that circuit goes down or something, and they end up learning the routes via one of their transit connections. From that, then they'll go and they'll propagate the route because it matches their prefix list outbound to one of their other transit connections. And so then you end up with a case where you've got some of these those leaks going on. And this is basically because they're not doing some advanced policy where they local pref their customer routes different from their peer routes, different from their transit routes. They're basically just using the default, in most cases it's the Cisco config. And in some cases there's outdated prefix lists, but that really is more on on the major network side, those networks in there, because people don't always inform, hey, I lost this customer. Can you take that prefix out of my prefix list? So the downsides to my technique is that obviously sometimes people change their business relationships. They get a better deal, $1 cheaper a meg or whatever, and so they shift their traffic around. So periodically I'll have things pop up where I'll actually find one of those networks changes their transit connection. Or adds a new transit connection. So I have to go and document that in my sort of exception list that bumps up the threshold. I also have this blame technique where I look for a series of the major network ASNs and then look for, and I generally assume that it's a smaller provider, that those networks are responsible enough that they're going to be able to, not leak themselves. And I go and I find the ASN after, the series of the major network ASNs. And I sort of say, well, it's probably them, and go ahead and flag that, as well as flagging, storing who the Tier 1 or major network ASN is. So I do that. So I actually have a web page for this. I've sent it out to the list before. You can go in, you can do searches based on the AS path, the prefix. There's statistics in there so you can see the most commonly leaked prefix that's detected, the most common AS path, and you can see the stats of how many leaks have happened over a certain day. I have a little bit of work to do on some of the CGI stuff. The PC was a little bit too fast in accepting my talk. I wasn't able to sit in my hotel room and do all the coding last night and part of today, so people could sign up automatically for their AS, which I've been promising some people for a while. So, if you do want to get to opt in, I can add you in. It's hard-coded in the code right now, and I can add you in if you'd like to get notices for your ASN that are interesting. And the emails come roughly, anywhere from 30 minutes or so after the leak event. So thanks to all the people who've sort of helped me along the ways, given me ideas and comments. Thanks to route views especially. If you're not feeding route views 2, I encourage you to try and feed that as well, because that's where I get all my MRT data sources from. And thanks to everyone who's already opted in and said, I want to hear about stuff that's going on with my network that you deem as suspicious. Dave.
If you want to contribute a feed to route views, just drop an email to help@routeviews.org, and we'll do what we can to turn it up.
Excellent. All right, thanks. Yeah.